Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight entitled The Changing Landscape for Football Agents with our invited speaker, Malle Koido. Malle is a registered FA intermediary. She is also the client director of international football at ISC, International Sports Consulting, which is a representation firm in the UK. And she will be talking about the role of the agent in the current landscape that we live in. And that will be the focus of our webinar. So Malle, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Diego. Always really great to be here, especially on the penultimate transfer window. But very much look forward to the course starting next week. So always a pleasure.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, by the way, we have to thank you, Malle, because we know you're super busy. It's the end of the transfer window and everything's coming down to the wire. So it'll be great to have your insights tonight. Just a quick introduction on myself, who will be moderating the webinar. My name is Diego Valdez. I'm the Director General at the Sports Business Institute Barcelona. We are an institute based in Barcelona, and what we do is we specialize in executive education for those that want to learn more about the business side of the football industry. Today's session or webinar will be lasting approximately 60 minutes or so. And the way we're going to structure it is we've identified a few questions that we want to ask Malle. And after that, we're going to open the floor for your questions. So stick around because you'll have an opportunity to ask Malle questions about anything you want related to the role of the agent. And in the meantime, we're also going to talk about our certificate in football player intermediation, which is coming up next week. So the webinar is going to be structured in the way we're going to discuss some of the key questions. We're going to open up the floor, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the course that we have starting next week. Okay. We always like to find out where you're connecting from. So just in the chat box, let us know where you're connecting from, and this will tell us both, where you're connecting from, and also that the sound is coming through okay on your side. So Doron from Israel. Hi, Doron. Nice to see you. Right. We have people in South Africa, California, the US, Leeds. Wow. Okay. Barcelona, Kenya. Malle, as usual, we have an international audience. So I think we'll have some great questions at the end from all over the world. Now, in order to start the conversation, Malle, I think a good idea would be to start understanding what the role of the agent entails. So can you tell us and our audience, what do agents do? What does the role entail?
Well, the role can be very different depending on the individual agent. Obviously, you have agents that specialize in representing players, working exclusively on behalf of players. You also have agents who are working more on the side of clubs. So that can be trying to sign a particular player for a club or also trying to sell players on behalf of a club, which especially during the last days of the window is a very hot topic for many agents. Very often also the agent is a deal maker in the middle because when you talk about negotiations between players, player agent, the club, very often it can be difficult to reach a compromise. And in the very big deals, very often there is more than one agent involved. So the agents who are in the middle, and I suppose that's where the word intermediary comes from, really have to find compromises that appease both parties and make the deal happen. Because very often the player wants to join the club wants to sign the player, but there are going to be certain clauses in the proposed contracts and offers that don't necessarily suit both parties, and then you're almost and the negotiator in the middle trying to find a common ground and trying to make the deal happen, and ultimately both parties want. So very often you are just there talking on behalf of either players or clubs and trying to ensure that both parties get the best possible deal, if that's at all possible. But if you talk about player representation as such, then the role of the agent, obviously, during the window can be very much around negotiating deals for their clients, whether it's renewals, whether it's considering possible moves, deciding if they're good ones or bad ones, advising their clients on what might be best for them. Maybe if there's 2 or 3 different deals on the table in the middle of August, Then what are the pros and cons of the deals, really understanding the ins and outs of the clubs the players might be signing for, what is the best long-term career plan, but then also outside of the window. There can be quite a work around recruitment. So, for example, going to games, deciding which players to sign next, which players to target, competing with other agents, trying to understand which players are running out of contract with the current agent, because bear in mind, in most countries, deals can only be for 2 years. And after that, if the player isn't happy, then they might be on the market looking for a new agent. So it's about being aware of these kinds of situations. It's also about keeping tabs on what the clubs are doing in terms of their recruitment policy, if there's maybe a change in ownership, change of direction, keeping a finger on the pulse of that. And also, you have to bear in mind, you have the commercial side of looking after players, the lifestyle side of it. So ensuring that, for example, if a player goes to a new club, that they settle in a new country, a new environment, that they got everything they need, that they're leading good lifestyle off the pitch. But also when we're talking about commercial opportunities, it will be around building links with companies like Nike and Adidas, but not only them, but also we can talk about fashion brands, car brands. If you think about the most commercially looked at players in the world, your Cristianos, your Messis, they work with a number of very different brands from categories that have nothing to do with football. So it's an incredibly diverse role, and obviously it becomes more visible during the transfer window, during the negotiations. But actually, there's an awful lot more to it during the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to get the perspective that you're sharing with us, because it's a role that, as you said, it's quite wide and encompasses a lot of different elements. Now, I'm sure that a lot of the people that are connecting tonight are either already working as agents or they're aspiring to become agents. And one of the key areas that we always mention, and Malle, you touch upon this a lot, is networking. So can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of building a network as an agent, and how can, potential agents or those that want to get into the business begin on that pathway to start building those relationships and nurturing them?
You cannot underestimate the importance of a good network, whether it's you're trying to sign players or whether it's about trying to place the players in clubs. Because some agents might take the point of view, well, I have a couple of very good players signed, I'm sure if the clubs want them, they come to me. Doesn't quite work like that. First of all, for you to sign good players, you need to be quite plugged into the player community. So you need to be having a lot of different conversations with different players. You need to have awareness of, for example, if you're focusing on young players, who's up and coming. Or if you're focusing on a particular market, you need to have really good awareness of that market. And again, not just in terms of watching games superficially, but also knowing the background to players, knowing what their attitude is like, knowing where they are now, but then also where they might be 2 or 3 years down the line. Again, that's really, really important with younger players, and understanding a bit about their environment and maybe even some data or some training information surrounding them. So that's the side of players. You don't just sign players randomly. You need a fairly good network of players to either sign them directly or get them on mandates. When we talk about clubs, then again, football clubs can be really, really hard to get hold of. The bigger the leagues are, the harder it can be to actually have conversations with clubs. At ISC, we're very lucky in the sense that we have a number of really wonderful multilingual market managers who, for example, if they look after Germany or if they look after Belgium, if they look after Israel or the US, they have the contact details of every single club in a particular market, and to touch base with them maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on the time of the year. At the moment, with some clubs, it can be several times a day in the last few days. But these networks don't just appear. You have to be really, really persistent. Because bear in mind, if you're a head of recruitment, let's say in the second division of England, let's not even talk about the Premier League, you are going to have 40 or 50 agents trying to talk to you every single day. You won't know all of these people. So imagine you have 50 strangers sending you emails, sending you WhatsApp messages, calling you. 24/7. Obviously, you're going to have to make certain choices in terms of who you're going to have a serious conversation with, and you have to filter some people out because you just can't manage the level of communication as a single person. So again, it's very much about being persistent, and if you don't have any joy first time around, you try again, and again. A lot of the guys that I work with in the markets have started working their markets from having fairly limited contacts, but through having a very strategic network building mentality, and just also certain tools and techniques to do that. They managed to get hold of an entire market and build some very significant relationships in a fairly short period of time. So it's very much about just being strategic and being persistent and building the network up. It massively helps if you come from football, whether it's being a coach, whether it's being somebody working in a club, in a commercial capacity, maybe in a scouting capacity. Some sporting directors have also now left clubs and become agents, and obviously they have excellent networks from their days working the club side of things. I would recommend really spend some time thinking about who you know, where they're at, and how you can work with them before properly setting up as an agent, because that network side is just really, really crucial. And if I'm being honest, I worked in the football industry more than 15 years now. And I've been working on the agent side 5 years. And even off the back of having 10 years of working in top clubs, working with federations, working with FIFA, UEFA, when I first started out, I still had to spend probably about a year and a half building a network. And it's a continuous process because people move on from jobs. Football, as all of you know, is a real merry-go-round where one day you're coaching that team, another day you're coaching another team. Same with sport directors, chief scouts. And as long as you have these long-term relationships where you have credibility with these people, then you can also actually take advantage of them moving to a new club and getting into a new club through having a previous relationship. So in terms of networking, you really need to be someone who's quite forthcoming, someone who isn't shy to either reach out to people via phone or email, introduce themselves, or even in a room full of scouts and sport directors, walk up to people, introduce themselves, and really paint the picture of why it would be beneficial for that individual to start a working relationship with you.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you mentioned a very interesting word there, strategic, and we'll talk about that more when we discuss the course, because I think there's a lot of opportunities to optimize the network if one is strategic and one has the right approach. Evidently, it's a challenge, as you said, and getting into the industry is always competitive, but there are ways to optimize that, and we'll talk about that. So it's really interesting to hear you highlight that. The next question that we wanted to tackle is one that comes up often, right, Malle? That sometimes people wonder, well, what do agents do for players on a daily basis? What is it like managing the relationship between an agent and a player? So, can you tell us a little bit more on this particular aspect of the role?
It very much depends on the player and their needs. I work with some players that don't need a whole lot of that day-to-day contact, and almost only really want an agent when there is a transfer deal coming or when there are some issues at the club, contract renewals, and they don't necessarily need to hear from you every single Monday morning. But I also have players who actually want to be almost in constant contact and need guidance on almost everything in their life. So if you look at the cycle of player recruitment, let's imagine you sign somebody right now today. Then I suppose the first steps are understanding where your client is at, probably sitting down with them and making a bit of a career plan in terms of, right, this is where we are now. In terms of playing style, in terms of market value, in terms of potential, in terms of having the best long-term career, and maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, these might be the best options. Look at the next couple of transfer windows. Is there a need for a transfer? If so, what kind of club should we be looking at? But at the same time, also looking at the current contract, is that a good enough contract? Does it reflect the market conditions? Is it on par with similar players and similar clubs? Can you make it better? What's the situation at the current club? Is the player getting enough games? Is there maybe a need to look for a loan club to get more games? Because bear in mind, a player that isn't playing, especially in the current market, can be very difficult to place in the future. Players always really want to be playing. And, you know, once they get a taste of being an important first team player, you kind of don't want to lose it. You don't want to be being left out of match day squads and thinking about what's around the corner whilst the value declines. So also you have that side of it. Initially also with players who are of slightly higher profile. So when we're talking about La Liga, Bundesliga, Premier League, in some cases maybe here in England, second division as well, depending on what club you're at. It's also about looking at commercial opportunities, image rights, social media, how that's managed day to day, whether we're making most out of the players' assets, just also general media image. That becomes especially important with very high profile players. If you think about someone like Jack Grealish, for example, or an example I always like to give, obviously, Lionel Messi. One of my colleagues mentions his media image, and it's not something that an agent could do on their own because it's almost a 24/7 job. So it's also about identifying the right people to help with the player and ensure that, for example, when they need any advice on their tax affairs, you have somebody there who can step in and who's a real expert in the field. Because when you talk about tax and football, then yes, your local accountant can probably have a bit of a point of view, but actually you have accountants specialized in dealing with players that have a career spanning across several countries and how to best structure contract in order to pay the optimal amount of tax. It can also be around investments and wealth management. So again, having the right people on hand to support that aspect. It can also even be around things like nutrition and training, especially with younger players. I remember working with one particular player who had immense potential, but who probably wasn't off the field living the right kind of lifestyle. And this is where we work together with a couple of experts in their fields, especially nutrition, to get the player on the right path. And not long after we started doing that, maybe about 6-8 months into it, the player did have amazing potential, but they're lacking aspects. And after doing that bit of work, he actually got interest from a major Champions League club. So again, these kinds of aspects are something the agent needs to bear in mind, as well as generally keep an eye on the player. Are they fine? Are they settling in well in a new environment? Are there issues at the club? Even going to watch games, it's really quite important that an agent goes and watches their own players' games, because how are you going to market the player if you don't really know how they play, if you don't really know where they fit in, how they're performing week to week? Whether it's going to watch the games live and having a little chat after the game, maybe going for dinner and just, giving the player that listening ear in terms of somebody who's removed from the club, who isn't directly involved in decision making of who's in there, who's the squad and who isn't, but still very well understands the environment the player operates in. Understanding any changing needs during the season, any changing aspirations. At some point, for certain reasons, players might be wanting to, for example, move to another league in the country, even especially when we're talking about places like the Middle East or the US, where players sometimes later in their career want to move for lifestyle reasons. But again, being aware of anything like that. It's almost endless, really. At times, you can even be the person taking a phone call at 10 or 11 p.m. where the player has gotten in some kind of trouble, and then you need to be the one resolving that. Again, when you think about Wayne Rooney and his agent Paul Stratford, then whenever Wayne Rooney has gotten himself into some hot water, you will see in the newspapers pictures of Paul in the middle of the night, picking him up, making sure everything is all right, making sure that the way that the media covers the story limits any damage to the client's image. It's really absolutely endless. But I guess one thing to also mention is constantly being in touch with clubs and understanding which clubs want your clients, where might the next opportunity be, because football is obviously ever changing. you might be doing really well and playing regularly in February, but in April or May, the club might decide that they actually want to buy a younger, more exciting player for your position. And then you as the agent need to be proactively ready to potentially move your player in the summer if needs change. So it's just constantly being on top of that, ever evolving situation surrounding the player, and making sure that whatever challenge they face, help is just around the corner, whether it comes to things that relate to performance or things that are completely outside of it. But effectively, just provide a 360 service to ensure that the player can focus on their football and they don't have a million other things to worry about.
Interesting. Now, the next question that we wanted to address here tonight, Malle, is, obviously we're in changing times, right? We've all been through COVID. As an agent, I'm imagining that it's been a very big challenge, not being able to go to the stadium, not being able to network, not being able to participate. But that's changing now. We're back. And, with that aside, we've also seen that the window in Europe closes tomorrow, and it's been wild, right? We've seen a bit of everything. And obviously we see the two big names there that have sort of eclipsed all other transfers up until now. But can you tell us a little bit more, or add a little bit of insight as to what's been different in this transfer window than others, and what are the trends that you're seeing post COVID?
Well, it's been a very odd window. It's been quite different from the others. Obviously, you've still seen the big transfers. We're talking about Messi, Cristiano, but we're also talking about Jadon Sancho, Jack Grealish, and a number of other players moving for huge sums of money. But also, if you look at just the flow of transfers on any given day, there's so many loans in there. There's so many swaps. That has massively increased compared to previous markets, because the truth is clubs at the moment don't really have any money. If you look at the Premier League, which is the environment in which we mostly operate traditionally, although we actually operate in third-class markets, then in the Premier League, clubs are still fairly safe, fairly secure. The level of wages hasn't dropped so much. They're maybe a little bit more careful, a bit more cautious about how to spend their money, and maybe they're signing less players, but they're still spending a good amount. Now, if you look at Spain, and as agents, something that we work on is club requirements. So basically, at some point, usually in spring, we speak to all the clubs and ask, well, what are your plans for the coming window? Who's coming in? Who's going out? How can we help? What positions do you need? And if you look at Spain, for example, it's been really heavily hit by COVID and other factors. So there's hardly any clubs in Spain at the moment, leaving aside maybe the likes of Villarreal or Sevilla, who can afford to pay decent money for players, who can afford to go to that 5 million, 10 million range. There's just so many free transfers, so many loans, and also so many clubs trying to offload players in Spain. So sometimes you offer a player from a Spanish club to a club in England, for example. It's a very good player, prime age, 25, 26. And you say, well, it's a free transfer. And they go like, how can it be a free transfer? That player has massive value. But then you can say, well, the player also has a wage of 2.5 million gross, and the club just can't afford to pay it. So they need to offload in one way or another. And especially late in the window, you can see these kinds of deals where quite high value players at times terminate the contract or get the contract terminated to move on, and to also enable the club to bring someone else in who's a bit cheaper. And it's similar in Germany and Italy. If you look at the numbers, then actually Germany, Italy, France, and Spain together have had pretty much the same transfer spending this window as England as one single market. So that's how big the cities really are. And again, looking at Dutch club, for example, their budgets have massively declined. So this is a market where clubs are awfully careful about who they're contracting. and what kind of players they bring in. Especially when it comes to young players, there's a whole lot less movement. So when we talk about the age of 16, 17, 18, many clubs just keep things as they are. They keep their academy as it is because, first of all, it's been difficult to scout the players. But secondly, also, they really want to focus on the first team and just have a strong first team to stay in the division that they're in, because that's where you get a little bit more guaranteed revenue in terms of TV rights and all of that. And I suppose another aspect to look at is intercontinental transfers. And I really feel quite sorry for players who are currently in their home countries, in countries in continents like South America or Africa or Asia, because there has been far less movement of these players. There's some absolutely fantastic players in South America available on very good terms who haven't moved this window and who aren't going to move this window, apart from moving to the MLS. Because travel to South America, also with COVID at the moment, is very challenging. Here in England, we have most South American countries on what they call the red list, meaning that if you're a club trying to scout a player, trying to sign a player, you either have people on the ground, but you can't really send your sporting director or chief executive or chief scout to watch the play in South America, have a conversation with the representatives, have any kind of face-to-face contact. And many clubs are quite reluctant to sign a player in that kind of situation. They really want to know who they're signing, who is that person. And also just building general live scouting awareness of these markets has been far more challenging than it has in previous years. Again, if you look at Argentina and if you look at the amount of players that would normally leave for Europe and Mexico, then normally that's the main source of income for Argentinian clubs. Whereas this window has been absolutely minimal international movement. And again, that's caused an awful lot of financial trouble for Argentinian football clubs in the current climate, because a massive stream of revenue has really dried up for them.
Sorry, I was on mute there. No, interesting to see that. Obviously, we see the big names here with Messi and Ronaldo, but the reality is that COVID has had an effect, and interesting to see and hear about the loans and the different types of deals that are happening and that are not happening because of the effects of COVID. Right. Maybe to finish off, one last question from my side, and then we'll open up the floor and we'll talk a little bit about the course. We've heard it for a while, Malle, that FIFA will be introducing new regulations for agents. From what we know, it's expected for next year. But can you tell us a little bit more? Because I'm sure in our audience, there's people that are wondering, well, if I want to become an agent or if I want to get into this industry, one of the first things you need to know is how to operate and what are the regulations. So what do we know now? I know it's been changing, and I know there's no definitive answer to that. But can you tell us a little bit about where things stand?
Well, to give you a bit of background, first of all, back in the day, so pre-2015, we had something called the FIFA licensed agent. So that was a title that you could get after passing a particular test that FIFA had set. That was also a bit localized to each individual country, but overall, it was a test for agents to show that they knew regulations, that they understood about the basic function of transfers, how they work, what is required, that they were basically qualified to represent players. And in around 2015, FIFA decided that that was no longer necessary. It was a lot to do with the fact that a lot of players and clubs didn't actually use the licensed agents. They were using their family members. They were also using unlicensed agents because the FIFA exam was quite tough. I think 80% of people that took it failed it. So you would still have people operating in the marketplace who were really great networkers, who were able to convince and sign players, but then actually weren't licensed and maybe were using other individuals to front on their behalf. And quite often they'd be paid by clubs in consultancy fees. So FIFA wanted to have a bit more of an awareness of where is the money in the game going, and really opened up the market and said, right, okay, each individual federation is now going to govern the agents working in the territory. That in practice has been quite complex, shall we say. Here in England, for example, we have roughly 5,000 agents. I don't think we have 5,000 professional players, so I'm wondering who all of these agents are actually representing, but we have this number of agents. And it's similar in some of the other bigger markets, such as Germany, such as Spain, huge numbers of people coming out of woodwork and registering as an agent, because the process is really, really simple. Here in England at the moment, if you want to become an agent, or shall we say intermediary, which is the official term that nobody really likes, if you want to do that, then you need to fill in a couple of pages of paperwork, read a declaration that says that you don't have a very extensive criminal record, self-certify yourself, pay the federation, I believe, as of £500, and voila, you are an agent. You can operate in the marketplace and you can sign players, you can launch a contract with the federation, all the usual stuff. But the thing is also, every country has gone in a different direction. So if you look at Scotland, just across the border, then they don't even have a system whereby you have to pay a fee to become registered. You just basically turn up on the day of the deal and sign the paperwork, and then effectively through making that deal, you are the agent. But there's no central governance of the players' representation contracts or anything similar. Then if you look at France, then France have decided they have an exam in place, which in turn makes it quite difficult for people who are not French nationals or French speakers to operate in France, because for them to do that, they would have to pass an exam in France in the French language, governing the particular regulations of the French Federation as well as FIFA regulations. So that means that a lot of people in France collaborate with foreign agents whenever the foreign agents want to bring players into the French market, because they're the only people licensed to do that. And again, it's just completely different country by country. In some countries, a complete Wild West. In some other countries, you have quite strict regulations that you have to meet in order to actually operate in the marketplace. What makes it difficult as well is, my company, for example, we operate in 20 markets, which means that closing deals in any of these markets requires one or more people to become registered in that particular market and again follow the regulations of that market. And if you are having a lot of conversations around the world, then it just becomes a real unnecessary barrier to doing business, whereas previously licensing was global. I could go on about this for a long time and giving different examples of different countries, but bottom line is the system isn't really working, and also there's nothing to really ensure the quality of agents in the marketplace. So for players to choose, for example, from these 5,000 agents registered in England can be quite difficult. You really don't know who's good and who isn't, who knows what they're doing and who isn't, because everyone can give you a great presentation and say, we're going to do great things with your career, and then 2 years later you find out that wasn't really the case, and then that's 2 years of your career quite possibly lost due to having chosen an incompetent agent. So coming back to how things are changing, FIFA for quite a long time now have been discussing bringing back the FIFA agent licensing exam. So that should hopefully be in place next year. We'll see how things go, but the discussions are now quite advanced, which I believe is a really positive change. At the same time, though, they're also talking about capping agent commissions, which has been very, very controversial, because at the moment, although we already have a convention of charging either clubs or players 5 to 10% of the value of the contract or the transfer, it's still, you can still charge pretty much anything you want, from 1% to 20%, whatever it is. And FIFA want to cap it at a particular point. At the moment, they're recommending 3%, and there's now discussions underway around what that should be. There's also a couple of lawsuits brought by agents to debate whether FIFA had the right to actually cap agents' commission, considering we're operating in the free market, especially in the context of European competition law. But then also the other side of it is multi-party representation. So at the moment as well, it's possible for a single agent in a deal to represent the player, the buying club, and the selling club. And if you think about it, all of these actors in a deal are actually acting against each other, because the buying club will obviously want to pay the lowest possible price. The selling club will want to get the highest possible transfer fee for the player. The player also is going to have to make decisions probably based on where they have the best chances to progress their career, where can they maybe get the most money as well, where would they generally be happiest. So basically all of these actors have different interests, and if the same person represents them, then how is it going to work? You know, you can't go to court and for the same parties to have the same lawyer, for different parties to have the same lawyer. It just doesn't really work. Football's a funny game though, because like I said in the beginning, very often the role of the agent is to be that person in the middle, ensuring that all the parties reach a compromise. It's almost like being a mediator at times, and the discussions do get quite heated. So from that point of view, it's important to understand that actually in a deal, the agent can represent the interests of all the parties and bring them together to then make that deal work. However, I do understand the conflict of interest element there. Especially when it comes to representing both the player and the club when the club is trying to sign the player. Again, totally conflicting goals in the negotiation. So FIFA want to put an end to that, and they want to have some caveats around you can represent two particular parties, but not all three, etc., etc. So these are really the main changes, but I suppose what's most going to affect anybody currently working as an agent or wanting to become an agent going forward are just the commission cap and also the exam. Now, we don't know too much about the exam yet. There are some draft proposals flying around exactly how all of that would work. And knowing FIFA and the football authorities, most likely they are going to communicate this quite last minute. And then everybody's going to have to scramble to prepare and do that. But overall, my personal opinion is that from a player's point of view, from a club's point of view, and from the agent's point of view, having that exam back in is going to be a real positive, because it's going to give the professional a bit of prestige back, where you can actually say, hey, I do know about regulations. I do know about how the market works. I do know about the particular local federation bylaws and regulations, and I can represent the player to be successful in the contract negotiation. Whereas obviously at the moment there's no real filter to verify which people operating in the marketplace do a good job and which ones should not maybe quite be trusted with the responsibility of having a player's career and future in their hands, because it's a very, very big responsibility to have on the shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Okay. Well, at this point, what we want to do is tell you a little bit about the course that we're offering, which is starting on September 6th. In the meantime, if you have any questions, start thinking about what you want to ask and put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring and having time to answer some of your questions. But as I said from the beginning, we wanted to introduce the certificate that we offer here at SBI in collaboration with Malle. It's for football player intermediaries, agents, and it covers a lot of what we've talked about already today. Just to give you a little bit of background and tell you what the course entails. It's online. It's 100% online with live classes using this exact same platform. It lasts 13 weeks. And what we do is every Monday, we have what we call a master class, where we bring in an invited guest speaker. Now, the guest speakers, I'll show you who we've secured already in just a moment, but it's a mixture of not only agents, but also sports lawyers, sporting directors, professional footballers, scouts, brand managers. And the reason why we decided to bring this faculty together was to provide you a 360 overview of the role of the agent, not just from the perspective of the intermediary, but also what the relationship entails when they deal with clubs and sporting directors, when they deal with players, when they are talking to scouts. So all of this we cover in the course with professionals that are working in the industry, such as Malle, and that provide you insights, not just from a theoretical standpoint, but really what's happening in today's sector that you need to know if you're already operating as an agent, if you want to become one. So that's the overview of the course, just to give you a little bit of a background as to who we have as speakers. Obviously, Malle leads the course, and through Malle and her network, we've secured a lot of these guest speakers, which include Daniel G, who's one of the top sports lawyers in the world, really operating in the UK, but he's also the author of the book Done Deal. I'm sure many of you out there have heard of Daniel. So he comes and talks about how to negotiate contracts, how to structure them. Victor Horta, sporting director at Leeds United, Premier League club. Malle was talking about this earlier, how how challenging it can be to go and knock the door of a Premier League club or of a top club in any league, really. So here you have the opportunity not just to learn from them, but also interact, engage, ask questions, and build a relationship at the end of the day. So a sporting director of a Premier League club, it's not every day that a potential agent has access to. So having the opportunity to do that in the course is something that we wanted to offer to our students. Dominic Vieira, another agent working out of Spain. Interesting thing about him is that he represents top talent, including Ter Stegen. So Ter Stegen, the goalkeeper of FC Barcelona and the German national team. So he represents him among other players. But it's interesting to hear his perspective as an agent himself. Laura, formerly working with Dundee United as the head of legal and football administration. So she talks about how the club operates when it comes to transfers and the FIFA TMS system. So again, we wanted to bring real life examples of people working in clubs in different sectors of football that could provide you that opportunity. Not only that, professional players having the opportunity to see or hear the perspective of a player and the relationship with agents is also interesting, because you're not only hearing one side of the story, you're hearing the other side from the player. And in this case, we have a long-standing relationship with many professional footballers, and one that has graciously agreed to come on to our course again is Matt Ritchie. So Matt plays for Newcastle United. So again, a Premier League player. It's not every day that as a potential agent you hear what a professional footballer at that level expects from an agent, the relationship that they've dealt with. So that's all for you to have direct insight as to what the role entails. And then just to finish off a few other names, Enrique Ripoll. Enrique is a top sports lawyer as well. He's represented clubs like FC Barcelona when they've had trials with different issues in the past. He now has his own practice, and Malle talked about these draft proposals that FIFA is looking at to reintroduce the agent exam. Well, people like Enrique are very closely linked to organizations such as FIFA, and in many cases they have access to these drafts. So having them come to the course also allows you to get insight into what the exam may be all about. Obviously, it's not definitive, because this is still ongoing. But people like Enrique, we've had Marcos Mota as well before in the past. They are people that are very closely linked to FIFA and the people negotiating. So these drafts and these potential, hints as to what the exam may have, it's people like Enrique and Marcos that can provide that information. And then finally, just a couple more names. Christian Martin. He's the CEO of Be Engaged Sports. So he looks at his masterclass from the perspective of a marketing side, how to manage the relationship with players when they talk about potential endorsements, image rights, that sort of thing. So he's an expert in that side of the business. And then Victor Ocando, he's a sports lawyer based in Arizona. So he talks a little bit more about the business model in MLS, which, as you guys may know, it's a very different structure than the rest of football across the world. And Victor talks about MLS and how to represent potential players in that market, either bringing them to MLS or taking them elsewhere from the perspective of the US. Now, as I said before, Matt is coming onto the course as a speaker, and we're delighted to have him on board. So that's something that we've announced recently. Couple more points before we turn it over, and I don't want to spend too much time because we want to get to your questions, but I do feel it's important that you understand what the course delivers. One of the areas that Malle talked about at the beginning was networking, and as an agent, and she very much stressed this, it's important to be strategic. It's important to build relationships, to nurture them, and when you join a course such as this, you're not only learning the knowledge and the skills that you need to be aware of, but you're also entering a collaborative community that will allow you to build relationships, to nurture relationships, and potentially have opportunities down the road. We've had, and Malle can attest to this, we've had people that did the course who may have been based in different parts of the world, and then eventually started collaborating and looking at potential opportunities to do business. So we have this screenshot here of WhatsApp, because what we do is we create a WhatsApp group among all the participants in the course that come from different parts of the world. Malle, myself, and other SBI faculty are there to provide you an opportunity to be constantly engaging through those 3 months that we're going to be together. So I'm sure many of you, in fact all of you perhaps, have been involved in WhatsApp groups with friends or other people, and you see that it's a very direct, it's a very agile form of communicating, very much different to email. And the reason I mention this is because after 3 months, where you're collaborating, whether you're networking, whether you're engaging with your classmates, you really do get to know them, and you come out with a strong network of like-minded peers, many of them who are already working agents, others who come from the sector, and others who are just looking to get started. So it's a great collaborative community that we create, to help you thrive and to help you, find opportunities down the road as you network. And just a quick glance here at the people that have done courses with us at SBI, you see that I think last time we checked and tabulated, we were at 89 or 91 countries, and the list keeps growing. So that means that when you join a community such as the student community at SBI, you're having an opportunity to engage with people in different markets and potentially open doors across different parts of the world. Last thing I'll mention before turning it over to your questions is, at SBI, we're very focused on delivering value to our students, whether it's through this course or any other programs that we offer. And we're constantly looking to build relationships, to connect with executives in the top organizations, whether it's clubs, leagues, federations, associations, brands, etc. And the reason we do that is because we want to put you in touch with these executives, with these individuals who can then teach you and also allow you to connect and engage with them. So as you just saw with the guest speakers for this course, it's not every day you have access to those types of individuals to talk, to ask questions, and to learn more about them and have an opportunity to network with them. That said, I'll leave it over for you guys to reflect. There's still some time to join the course, which starts next Monday. So if you go to our website, which you see there, sbibarcelona.com, you can see all the details. You can also get in touch with us if you want to learn more, and we'll be happy to tell you a little bit about what the course offers. Right, so that said, let's turn it over to your questions, because we have a few minutes remaining, and we can then tackle a few questions that are coming up. So I see that Omid had a couple of questions. So let me see if we can bring him on. So 1 second, Omid, I'll try to unmute you and see if you can come on. So 1 sec, unmute.
Is it me?
There we go.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I had a question about the networking. I think you explained it completely about the networking in this course, the football intermediary course. And also I had another question about the regulations, because I would like to know, next year the FIFA is going to change everything, and maybe there is a exam or examination over there for new agents. I would like to know, do we know anything about it? And in this course, we are going to learn about it, or no? We should wait till next year for these new regulations.
Well, as Malle mentioned, and I'll turn it over to her because she'll have insight on this as well. But as she mentioned, this is still ongoing, so that the definitive exam questions or format is not defined yet and is not made public. But what we do have is individuals that are taking part in those conversations and have access to some of the drafts that can then come and share some of that information to some extent to the capacity that they can, obviously, because a lot of this cannot be shared, but give you an idea as to where the ball is rolling. So that's what we could say from what you could expect from the course. But Malle, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that.
Absolutely. So like I said, normally the finalization publication of all of this tends to happen quite late for us agents. So quite often they only give us a couple of months notice to really properly prepare for what's about to happen. But I think probably the best masterclass in the course covering that would be from Enrique Ripoll and also from Marcos Mota. Marcos Mota is the Brazilian lawyer behind the Neymar deal to PSG and many other very significant deals. And he is very much involved in the developing of the new age regulations. And last time around, he gave us a very, very good insight into what it's going to look like. It's a very much evolving situation. So over the next few months, there will definitely be quite a lot of changes. There could be some pushback on deadlines as well, because originally these regulations were supposed to come into force around this time, but they haven't yet. And I wouldn't be completely surprised if there's further delay. But yes, we have two speakers on the course who can give you very, very good insight into what exactly is going to happen and how to best prepare for changes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your question, Omen. And around the networking, did you want to add anything else, or was that clear?
No, thank you. It was clear.
It was clear. Okay. Thank you, Omen. Well, great to have you online tonight. Right. So let's move on. We have a couple more people that have asked questions. So let's see here. I think David. Let's see. David Derrico. So let me see if I can bring on David or David, I should say, perhaps. So 1 second. Find David or David. Here we go. You can tell us if you prefer David or David. So there we go. David, the floor is yours. You should be able to unmute yourself. There we go.
The U.S. national team in soccer played against Pele and Cruyff, Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto, Georgie Best, all these wonderful people. And we are, Malle, what I asked about is your contact information. We're launching a couple major initiatives. One is a sports ticketing platform with our strategic partner. They sell 65,000 tickets to the top soccer, U.S. sports, concerts, F1, U.S., Canada, and Europe. And we have another platform. We're partnering with a fundraising company that's raised $560 million for their stakeholders. So we have the ability to create branded fundraising platforms. So one of the things that we're interested in is reaching out to the agent community. We have fundraising, we have the tickets, we're also going to be very deeply involved in NIL, name, image, and likeness. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, with the U.S. sports, where now the athletes can sell their name in college, they can sell their name and all of that. And also with NFT, the non-fungible tokens. We're going to be doing that for our ticketing. We're going to be doing that for our fundraising. So I wanted to reach out to you guys because this course the course itself looks very interesting, but also to reach out to the agents to say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we can do to help you and your clients, because a lot of the agents, they have virtually no information about either themselves or their clients that they represent, right? And so we have a digital fundraising magazine that we're putting together that can cover I'm a Man U guy. I played against George Best probably 20 times. Dennis Violet, who survived the 58 plane crash. He was my coach. So the idea is to be able to have these digital publications about Manchester United and then bring those into the tickets, the NFT, and make them as collectibles so they can donate, they can sell or donate part of that revenue back to their club, their cause. So
Right.
everything for us is giving back and helping people.
Great. No, I mean, sounds like a fantastic initiative, David. Thank you for sharing that with us. And you know, one of the things I mentioned at the outset, and it's great to hear people like David, who has so much experience and comes from a footballing you know, background himself. One of the things that is interesting is, and I always like to allude to this, and perhaps David, you can attest to this yourself through your experience and the project that you've just you know, mentioned to us. And I mean, I'm going to bring it back to the course, because a lot of the times I have conversation with people that have projects like yours, David, and that want to start different initiatives, and they wonder, okay, well, what do we do now? Is the course, you know, a good option? And in those conversations, I always like to bring it back to something that that I think is very true, that you know, we can discuss now the opportunities and the potential, and we'd probably be talking about 10-15% of what that opportunity may represent, but the other 90% is untapped. And it's until you start a journey, until you start connecting with people, until you start building those relationships, that sometimes, you know, you're able to see the fruits of some of those projects that are involved. So I would encourage you, David, just to get in touch with us. You know, we'll put our contact information at the end, and you know, let us know if you want to learn more about the course, or just, you know, have a conversation about the project that you've mentioned tonight. So thanks, David. Right. I see that we have another question here from, just go back, because we had Leon, I believe, had a question. So perhaps we'll have Leon's question, and then we'll wrap it up, because I know Malle needs to get back to the busy transfer market that's happening as we speak. So let me find Leon on the attendees list. We'll go over to his questions, and then we'll leave our contact information if you guys have anything further that you'd like to discuss. So there's Leon. Leon, you should be unmuted. So I think you had a question. I didn't have time to read it in the chat, but go ahead. The floor is yours.
No, I was just listening to what you were saying about the consultation with agents around these new regulations, which is obviously going to be a major shift in what's been before. But I just find it rather strange that FIFA aren't sort of fully consulting. Obviously, I don't know exactly what's been going on recently, but I know that the AFA had been talking about a very strong legal challenge. It was the wonderful Jonathan Barnett who was discussing that, and sort of was very vocal in the media about it. So I don't know if there's been any update on that, or whether there's sort of existing legal action. But it was interesting when you mentioned Marcus Motta was part and parcel of those new draft regulations. So I just sort of like to know a bit more about that, if possible.
It's been an interesting process, considering that us as agents, we negotiate people's employment contracts, and I guess to a degree also encourage collective bargaining in certain environments. It's interesting that us in the profession, we aren't particularly well organized or very unionized, because again, if you think about, for example, the AFA, that's probably, as far as I know, one of the better organized agent associations when it comes to work at national level. You know, in Spain, they're relatively well organized, but really considering that we all work globally, the most influential agents work globally. There isn't really one organization, one umbrella that brings all the agents together. We tend to be quite independent, quite sort of soul and selfish creatures at times, and we quite often find it quite hard to collaborate when it comes to protecting our own interests. So there's been somewhat of a consultation process. I was at an AFA meeting a couple of years ago where some representatives of FIFA came down to listen to some of the ideas that we had. And there's also a couple of international agent associations that are part of the consultation process. But to be honest, most of all, FIFA seems to be listening to the voices of federations, of FIFPro, and these kinds of voices, as opposed to the voices of agents that actually work in the industry and know how it works inside out, in practice, day to day. Because the way that maybe clubs and players see it can be quite different to the way that agents see it. But yes, as agents, we don't really have a democratic central process to represent ourselves, and it's more about just single, quite vocal individuals that tend to have more a voice in the process, as opposed to a real, proper, well-organized consultation process, such which is really a shame, because you were thinking in a situation like this, where your livelihood and where your operating environment are severely affected, there would be more in place for you to actually have a say on this. So getting in on the consultation process as an agent working independently in any country around the world can be quite challenging. I feel that most of the voices also currently heard in that environment tend to be from Western Europe and to a degree South America. But then what about the rest of the world? So the legal challenge, I believe one of them has been brought forward, and there's also talk about 3 or 4 of them all together. And obviously they would be coming through different courts, different legal systems. We'll have to see how it goes. But I think ultimately the talk of the legal challenges is more of a bargaining tool to get FIFA to really listen to the voices of agents and the propositions and come to some kind of agreement that really appeals all parties. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that agents want to take FIFA to court, because bear in mind also, seems to be the impression that agencies are these huge multi-million-pound businesses, and actually the vast majority of agents and agencies are very small businesses. It's not the case that agents necessarily want to actually take FIFA to court, but it's more the case that agents all want to have the voices heard, and they want to actually influence the regulations that are going to very directly influence the way that we can operate in the marketplace going forward, and offering useful input and offering their point of view. I think just in many cases it hasn't been put forward in a sort of structured and representative manner, purely because we're lacking the kind of forum where that would normally happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sounds like there may be some sort of moves, I think, when these regulations finally go through, to almost unify, not necessarily throughout the world, but certainly in certain jurisdictions. I think FIFA having a massive push on regulating, across the sort of FIFA organizations, and it's getting much more stringent. So I think something that will probably mobilize agents, I think, to do that. But yeah, very interesting.
And what's also actually been really interesting is last time around we had Marcus Motta on, and he was talking about some of the different charging structures that are being proposed. And funny enough, I think one of the charging structures that FIFA is going to make possible, which really previously was quite unheard of, is agents charging clients by the hour, or having people put on a retainer type of thing, which in industries like the legal professional accountancy is really normal. And sometimes people question why we aren't just doing this as agents, because something to bear in mind is, as an agent, very often you're working only on commission, meaning that if you don't make a deal go through, then you earn nothing, whereas you put in hundreds of hours of work into making something happen. So from one point of view, it actually makes all the sense in the world, and also makes the agent fees far more predictable. But it seems like FIFA really want to ensure there is still quite a broad remit, looking at how agents get paid and how the commissions are paid. I think their main goal really in this case is transparency, most of all.
Absolutely. No, I think that's very much the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Thanks for your question. Right, so with that, we can bring things to a close. Well, there's one last question here in the chat. We won't be able to get to all the questions, unfortunately, but Abubakar Ahmed Rufai says, do Did the exam affect those who have already taken the exam? So I guess he's one of the original FIFA agents. And as far as we know, Malle, everybody will have to retake it, right? But what's the latest you're hearing on this?
Well, again, there's a couple of different conversations around it. Bear in mind also, the last time people took the exam was good 6-7 years ago. So things would have changed quite significantly in some aspects. And in my personal opinion, it would be fair for everyone to take it because, again, one thing is passing an exam a long time ago. Another thing entirely is staying up to date with the latest developments, the latest changes, and something FIFA also want to build into the proposition is continuous professional development. So the requirement for agents to take courses on a regular basis to get a certain amount of points per year so that they can prove that their knowledge is up to scratch, which again, in many other professions, when working in medicine, law, again, accountancy, anything where you're offering somebody a professional service based on your knowledge is essential. It's normal to take these courses and keep up to date. And again, that seems like a fairly reasonable proposal for people to be able to take the exam once, but then keep educating themselves through courses and getting the required amount of points per year to keep showing that they are staying up to date with the latest regulations.
Yeah, no, really interesting. Excellent. Well, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks to everybody for attending. I want to acknowledge everybody that attended tonight because, of course, an hour of your time is very valuable, and to have it spent with us, it's great for us. And I also want to acknowledge our former students that attend, who are our great ambassadors throughout the world. So I saw that Sile was here, Grecia, Alfredo, Ian, George, Rastom, John Quilly, among a few others that have attended and that are not only former students and part of the SBI community, but fantastic, ambassadors for us throughout the world. So really appreciate that, guys, and thanks for the positive feedback. I know that several of you had already endorsed the course after having done it and posted it in the chat, so we really appreciate it. And always great to have you as we like to call it, the SBI family, that it keeps growing around the world. So last thing to say is thank you for having been here tonight and listened to the webinar. We hope you found value. We hope you found interest in the conversation we had with Malle, and also learn about the course that we're offering in case it's something that you want to consider if you want to move into that space of whether it's optimizing and accelerating your path as an aspiring agent, or building that network and continue to grow and develop yourself if you're already an agent yourself operating in the business. Finally, thanks, Malle, for taking an hour of your time in this busy period, which we know it's crazy for agents. So really appreciate your time as always, and we're looking forward to having you on the course, leading it and moderating it as of September 6th. So thanks for that, Malle.
Thank you very much. And only 7 days to go. Only
7 days to go, and yeah, a little bit less to see if Mbappe makes the move. So we're all waiting on that, and until then, we'll find out hopefully by September 6th. If some of you are in, we'll discuss that and many more other interesting things that I'm sure will happen as we finish the market tomorrow. So all the best, everybody. Have a great evening, and hope to see you very soon. Take care. Bye, Malle.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.